All right, everybody, welcome in to episode 89 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, the only sports podcast that talks about both American and Brazilian sports. We're live here on August the 7th, 2023, what was a very, very stormy day here in Eastern Tennessee, but we are here and we are ready to roll from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States. And joining me from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil is Gustavo Tomazeli. Gus, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, doing good. It's been a very dry week in Brazil. Not much of rain, but I just want to send my thoughts and prayers to the people of East Tennessee, especially my beloved city of Knoxville. I saw the scenes and the aftermath of the tornado, and there was some. I hope everybody's okay because I know in the area that was affected, it was a very familiar scene for me. It was Pellissippi Highway, Oak Ridge Highway, where I went to college, where the family of my ex girlfriend lived. So I hope they're doing okay. The community, but that's August. There's the tornado season.
Absolutely. So far as I've seen, that I don't think there have been any serious injuries, so that's good news. At the station here in Chattanooga, we almost had a lightning strike go through the building, so that was certainly fun. Sounded like a bomb going off, but you get what you get when it gets 90 plus degrees and it's super humid. It's just one of those things. But hopefully things will cool down for a while and we'll get back to just more normal ish weather for this time of the year. But we have so much to get into. We've probably one of the more anticipated episodes, I would say, of the pod between the two of us, just because of the topics. And normally, I feel like we would start with the World Cup, but we decided that we wanted to start with the topic here in the U.S. of the fact we've just seen a major conference basically die. Friday was Armageddon for the Pac-12, a long-standing institution. You can trace its roots all the way back to the Pacific Coast Conference in 1915 out in California, Oregon, Washington, and eventually grew to 12 teams over time, adding Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, um, and was the permanent conference of the West Coast. Has always been part of the Rose Bowl. You've had so many legends go through places like USC, like UCLA, like Washington, Oregon, and Friday was the death knell because obviously we knew heading into this year, USC, UCLA were heading to the Big Ten, and for the other 10 teams, there was an era of what to do. Uh, 2 weeks ago, Colorado left to go to the Big 12. There were 9 teams left. George Kalikoff, the leader of the Pac 12, the commissioner, who had taken over for Larry Scott, apparently had proposed an Apple TV deal that only would have been worth like $20 million per school. And apparently that wasn't good enough for everyone else because Oregon and Washington bolted for the Big Ten at apparently a reduced price, mind you, that USC and UCLA got in for. And then Utah and both Arizona schools joined Colorado in the Big 12, leaving Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford, and California as the only four left in the Pac 12. Just kind of what was your reaction, Gus, when you heard about all of this?
My first reaction is I think we're going through an alignment that I think it happens in college football every 10 to 15 years but now it's extreme. More something Colin Cowherd said on his radio show. College football needs to be more, have better and more relevant games during the regular season. And when you're forced to have big brands colliding with each other within the conference games itself, then you make the sport appealing, the league appealing, which means more money because universities now more than ever needs revenue. Especially college sports. Everything uh, is getting, inflation in America is getting bigger. So, you need to think, how to increase revenue, and that's the result. And when you have change of dynamics in not only sports but in life, there are the people who are going to succeed and the industry, there's groups that are going to succeed and there's groups that are going to fail. And I think the Pac-12. Let's start with the group that failed. Pac-12. You know, if you think about it, the Pac-12 has not been to the playoffs, and the AAC has been to the playoffs. That's enough argument. I think there's enough argument. Like, how can a conference that has the biggest brands like two of the biggest brands in college sports, one is funded by Phil Knight, and the other is in the heart of the most rich state in America, and there are other big programs like Washington and Utah. How can this conference has not been able to make the playoffs since 2016? And the AAC, that is I'm not saying they're irrelevant, but they don't have big brands. They have to overcome more things to get they got in.
I mean, this all really goes back right to 2010 because there was once upon a time when the Pac-10 was the Pac or Pac-12 was the Pac-10. They were trying to get 6 teams from the Big 12. They were all 4 Texas schools and 2 Oklahoma schools to leave the Big 12 to go to the Pac-10. And that would have become the Pac-16. As drafted Larry Scott had just joined it because this was right after Missouri and Texas A&M had left for the SEC, and the Big 12 was precariously close to itself being destroyed, which always makes it ironic now that the Big 12 has come back and has killed the Pac-10, or Pac-12 rather. But when they didn't get Texas and Oklahoma, because Texas didn't want to give up the Longhorn Network, that was the deal there. The SEC was willing to work with them on that. The Pac-10 was not at the time. And when they were not able to work with them, that signed their death warrant because you weren't able to get them. And now you left USC stranded on an island. And I think, when you look at how sports have changed on the West Coast, right? Because we talk about Los Angeles, for example. Back when USC was amazing in the mid-2000s, you didn't have the Rams and you didn't have the Chargers in Los Angeles. But now you do. And now, go ahead.
Not only you didn't have NFL, the Dodgers were irrelevant in baseball. The Angels, I know they got one World Series back in 2002, but that was it. The
Lakers with Kobe.
But they were, when the USC was thriving, they were in that kind of drought from because they were great in the beginning and the end of the decade, but in the middle they were in a turmoil period, and the Clippers, we don't have to talk about it. So then USC seemed bigger. I just want to, not only because you talk about not only in comparing to, like, they didn't have professional football, but the other professional sports in America, in the city of Los Angeles, weren't going good, and USC was thriving.
I mean, that really is a great point. USC was the big show, and USC getting to the Rose Bowl was the big show. Like, the Rose Bowl was the show in South California for a long time. But, I've heard a lot of people talk about, the Rose Bowl is dead because the Pac-12 isn't there anymore. But really take a look at the Rose Bowl the past couple of years. How many times have you actually really cared about the matchup in the Rose Bowl? In fact, what was the matchup in the Rose Bowl last year?
It was the match that seems to always happen: Penn State and Utah.
Is that a traditional Rose Bowl matchup?
No, but it seems to always happen. And Penn State is, I feel like they're like kind of like an automatic bid, because every time I think about the Rose Bowl, Penn State somehow is there. They play Utah, Ohio State, and they play Utah, and I can't remember when they, and I'm, but but
Yeah.
the Rose Bowl, and even when the Rose Bowl was gonna host a big game, it wasn't a COVID year, and the game had to be in Texas, I think.
All right, and that's a shout out Jason Wyrick, our dear friend. He says the Mountain West will be absorbed by the Pac to be the best G5 conference. I actually think the opposite. I think the Mountain West is going to absorb the Pac. Because, I mean, what does the Pac have leverage wise at? Outside, the one thing the Pac 4 now has is they still have the automatic bid to the CFP in 2024. But I do think that it's going to get revoked. I mean, you would think, right? Like, you can't have an automatic bid go to 4 teams. So, like, you would have to have the Mountain West join in, right? Or something. But then you would have to make a case.
Or a merge. The Pac-12 and the Mountain West can merge, and they would rename it, and probably the automatic bid will keep because of this merge. How about a merge?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. But here's my other question. If that happens, and I'll have to circle back around to my Rose Bowl point here in just a minute. What is, and I agree with Jason, we should revoke all the New Year's Six auto bids. We should just have the best teams play the best teams. I agree with Jason there. But if we keep this whole top 6 conference deal, right, and have 5 of them be a P5, who really is the 5th best conference? Would it be the Mountain West with the Pac? Or could it be the American Conference? I know the American Conference just lost their top brands. So I think the American would be right up there with this new Mountain Pac-12 deal. So that would be certainly very interesting, to say the least. But, as I kid ourselves, not one of those conferences would be anywhere close to the Big Ten, to the SEC, or even really the ACC Big 12. Because what you have now is basically, you have like almost a 4-tier system now in college football. You have Big Ten, SEC at the top, you get ACC, Big 12 right below them, but still major conferences. Then below that, you're going to have whatever happens with the Pac-12 Mountain West deal and American. Then below that, well, really, honestly, I'd argue Sun Belt's up in that tier too. Sun Belt has gotten really good. And then below that, you got like the MAC. So, and like Conference USA, one of like the 2 worst conferences. So I think you have the 4-tier system there. I did want to finish a point real quick about the Rose Bowl. The best Rose Bowls we've seen in the past 15 years, I would argue, are Texas USC, which was also the national title game, and then Georgia Oklahoma. 2 of them, those 2 were not traditional Big Ten Pac-12 matchups. Nor then I guess the best traditional Rose Bowl would have been USC and Penn State. But Penn State didn't join the Big Ten until 1991, right? So, like, is that really a traditional Rose Bowl matchup? I mean, not necessarily, right? Like, if Tennessee makes the Rose Bowl, is that bad for college football because we're not a Big Ten or a Pac-12 team? Like, I think it would be amazing to see all that orange in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. So, I mean, and I guess this just comes to a huge point and a huge contention over this issue because, when I was introducing the topic, the Pac-12 has been an integral part of college sports for over a century. 1915, this conference was created out west, and it's been a huge part of this adventure we have called college football. It has produced many of the sport's top teams. But as you said, the past 10, 15 years, the relevance has waned out west. The fan interest has waned out west. The TV ratings have waned out west. And you really have to blame Larry Scott for that because of the contract he signed. Now, granted, it gained the Pac-12 more visibility because before, I remember when I was a kid, there was like a top 10 matchup one time between USC and Oregon, 2 of the best brands in the Pac-10. And it was like on FSN, which was basically what the SEC network and like Bally Sports used to be. Like, it wasn't even on major network television. Like, it was hard to watch the Pac-10 growing up because I felt like it was often relegated to pay cable subscription channels outside of like USC games. But when they signed this new deal, a lot more of the games got on the TV. But the crux of that was it created this whole like 10:30 p.m. kickoff deal on the East. So your vast majority of your college football fans are in the South and in the Midwest. And a lot of them were not staying up to watch these Pac-12 games because, let's be real, And a lot of them weren't great matchups, right? Because there just wasn't a lot of great teams out west. Now, I think there were some bangers in there, and I love me a good Pac-12 After Dark game. And of course, a lot of gamblers love themselves some Pac-12 After Dark because they love Hawaii and all the late games they can bet. Um, but I do think that contract, by forcing all those games to be late, by not getting the preferred primetime slots, I mean, I can count the amount of times off the top of my head that the Pac 12 had preferred primetime games last year. I think of like Oregon Washington was the preferred primetime game, USC Utah was the preferred primetime game. It's really hard outside of those two games in particular to really think of a game that truly had a a prime position. Like for example, USC went to Corvallis last year. A great game, went down to the wire. One of Oregon State's great valiant efforts last year. Most people couldn't watch it. It was on the Pac-12 network, and that's another thing that really doomed this conference. Why would you create a TV channel that no one could watch outside of like direct TV subscribers? Like I have never had the Pac-12 network. Anytime I ever really wanted to watch a game on there, had to go through like StreamEast or something. Like you had to go through illegal means to watch a game on there. And there were times where like Lady Balls would play Stanford, and I'm just like, I can't watch it. I can't watch the channel. And apparently I was learning this, I didn't realize this. Apparently for each team, they created a sub Pac-12 network. So they have 12 Pac-12 networks effectively for each team, which makes literally zero sense. Because I don't know if the demand was ever really there for that. And clearly it wasn't, because I feel like if that many people really wanted the Pac-12 network, they would have gotten it. Like the Big Ten and the SEC network. Tons of people want those channels because those fan bases are spread all over the country. But the Pac-12 isn't quite the same with the national reach. Like I know one guy here in the Chattanooga area who's an Oregon State fan. Well, he actually went to Oregon State. But really, outside of that, it's really hard to think of any other Pac-12 alums, Pac-12 fans that are in the Chattanooga area, or really in East Tennessee. I mean, obviously, I know this is Vols country, but it just feels like when we think of college football, when I'm in the workplace and we talk college football, we're only talking about the SEC. We're only talking about the Big Ten. Pac-12 is irrelevant, and as you kind of lean back to you, because the American Conference has made the playoffs a couple of times now. The Pac-12 hasn't.
No, it was a great point that you made, and I feel right now college football also is becoming or needs to become a national product. And what I mean by that is you those moves of the SEC with Texas and Oklahoma, and the Big Ten follow, and even the Big 12 follow, is you can't limit it regionally. Like, because college athletics, especially college football, is going to become like the pros. Think about it. In the NFL, you have literally the NFL East, AFC East, where Buffalo Bills, right in the Northeast, plays Miami, deep in the Southeast. So you can't have geographical limitations when your sport becomes that big. So that makes sense. But at the same time, the Big 12 is just doing the obvious. And if you really think about it, this move is not only for college football, it's for the other uh, 30 plus sports that college athletics is all about. Because now you can make a friendly schedule within the Big Ten. Then the volleyball team of the USC don't need to travel to Maryland, don't need to travel to New Jersey, probably don't need to travel to Michigan. Then can stay in the West. They can make a schedule like they used to in the Pac-12.
I think what we're heading towards is they're going to have to divorce the other sports from football scheduling last year. I mean, you're going to have to, because I know like you had a lot of these softball players from like Oregon, for example. They're talking about how this is going to be horrible for their mental health. It's going to be horrible for their academics to have to theoretically play in Rutgers or at Maryland. But I do think it's going to trend more back to what you're saying because it's not going to be financially feasible for these programs to be sending all of their non-revenue sports to the other coast multiple times a year. Because you got to remember a lot like volleyball, softball, they aren't flying private, they're flying commercial. The only sport that's flying private is football. So, because and obviously they'll fly private, but then again, how many football games is Oregon really going to play on the East Coast? How many times is Ohio State really going to go out to the West Coast? You know, like, and people are talking about the loss of tradition, right? Like, and obviously, losing Oregon State, Oregon, losing Washington State, Washington sucks. But it doesn't really have to be that way. I mean, Georgia Tech left the SEC, and we still get Georgia Tech, Georgia every year.
Florida State still plays. Clemson, South Carolina still plays. So, if those athletic departments can schedule games like, I like the names that Colin Cowherd made. Panera Bread Tech, and Rose Beef University kind of programs. I'm not they schedule lower D1 schools or even FCS schools. If they can find spaces in the schedule for those kind of games, of course they'll find a space in the schedule for the rivalry games. Those ads, they're not stupid. They know they need to keep the rivalry games because those also are a big money machine.
I'll say this though about Colin Cowherd, just on a side tangent. I've never liked how antagonistic he's been to underdogs. Like I remember when I was a kid, I was listening to a show one day on ESPN Radio, and he was ranting about like Gonzaga and about Cinderellas and March Madness. And his complaint, and I remember him complaining a couple years ago about like Washington State with Mike Leach coming in and beating USC. And it always struck me weird. I've never heard a sports commentator openly admit that they hate underdogs. They hate Cinderellas. And he just wants to watch Blue Bloods.
But it's not about hating the Cinderella stories. He just make the point that feel good. It's like the feel good at the moment, but literally on the next matchup, people don't tune in because they don't keep watching because the blue blood is already being defeated. They're not gonna keep watching the Cinderella because of the story. They will like the blue blood being dethroned, not the Cinderella making it.
Well, I guess it's fair. I mean, this year's Final Four was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, granted, Florida Atlantic and San Diego State ended up being a great game, but I can't. But then again, I was still mad that Florida Atlantic beat Tennessee. So, like, if I were objective and I didn't have that connection, I would have been way more excited to watch that game. As is, I was just upset Tennessee wasn't there. But, it is going to kind of suck to not be able to see Oregon State or Washington State have their chances to win those big-time games. Oregon State literally just beat Oregon last year. So, like, the Beavers have a really good team heading into this season. But we all know that with the state of Oregon State's recruiting that that's not going to be sustainable. And I'll be curious to see how long they keep their current coach. And because I see what you're saying, guys. The business side, the logical side with me agrees. And it's kind of weird because I come from a fan and alum of a college football powerhouse, a top 10 program of all time in Tennessee. We are one of those blue bloods that are going to be fine as long as college football is fine. And, I don't have to worry about us being left behind like Oregon State or Washington State because I know my school has a ton of money. And that's what matters, right? Is do your school have the resources and the alums? And of course, Oregon had Bill Knight, and that's why they're going to the Big Ten, and that's why Oregon State is not, because they have that money. And it's kind of weird because there's some people who say they're never going to watch college football again because it's not about the amateurism, it's not about the traditions anymore. And for me, I still feel all those things. But also, I also went to, and I've always rooted for Tennessee. And to me, it doesn't feel like it's changing that much. Like Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC doesn't affect my enjoyment of Tennessee football at all.
No, it's just there are some loyalists or people that like to keep things the way they are, the way they are. But uh, college football as a whole are gonna find ways to keep the sport within their traditions, and you're still gonna wake up on Saturday morning and you're gonna watch ESPN College Game Day, and there's gonna be a big game on the afternoon in the SEC, and a big game in the Big Ten at night, and the Big 12 also is gonna have their big game. Probably you're gonna miss the Pac-12 after dark, but as we discussed earlier, there's still probably going to be games late at night, after 10:30, 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. I remember, watching San Jose State at 11:50 p.m. and they're not in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, but the irony is the Bachelor After Dark, it kind of led to the downfall because they weren't getting the most ideal TV spots for the entire country. Um, so that's kind of one of the issues that led to the end of the Pac 12. But for people, also, I want to address the whole, you know, this whole move is killing the soul of college football deal. Like, I don't know if you saw Eli Drakewitz in his 3 minute soliloquy. You'll have to watch it at some point. But effectively, he got up on a soapbox and was like, Did we consult the other student athletes in every other sport? Did we consult the fans before we made this move? Did we consult, you know,
They know what they know what he's basically saying. It's like, oh, you have a big family, and the dads makes the money, and and the dad found a better job that pays better, but and he moved his family somewhere in the country, but he didn't consult his family or his relatives about it. But he's the one paying the bills. He's the one footing the bill for the family. So
yeah, like here's an exact quote from Drinkwitz. We're talking about a football decision they based on football. But what about softball and baseball who have to travel across country? Do we ask about the cost of them? Do we know what the number one indicator of symptom of cause of mental health is? It's lack of rest or sleep. But like my question is, aren't they already traveling a lot? Don't you already have to, like Missouri, for example, has to fly to Tennessee, has to fly to Florida, has to fly to Texas. I mean,
but but college football foots the bill, pays the bill for the majority of sport. If you think about it, it's gonna be a football decision in in college athletics because football pays the bills. Where is the big revenue coming in college athletics? Football. Where there's more ratings? Football. Where there's more alumni engaged? Football. So football has to be the primary consideration when you make decisions about college athletics. It's simple.
like the only thing that compares is the NCAA tournament for basketball. Like that's it.
No, no. With this new playoff format, even the NCAA tournament is getting more relevant. Think about it, Nick. We just talked about how the Final Four in March Madness, nobody cared. Let's be real. Outside of the fans of those schools and probably some um, people that were betting or people that who really love basketball, nobody cared. But how about the college football playoff semifinals between, especially Ohio State and Georgia? There were people from all over the country tuning in.
I mean, you're right about that. I mean, there, and I think that's the big problem with college basketball is the quality of play is just complete crap now. Like it's
So,
fallen off a bridge. And we welcome in our friend Jason Warwick. All right, Jason, what's up?
No, I'm very much looking forward to this conference realignment nonsense. This was nothing. This was We talked nothing but this all summer last year on ESPN radio in Louisville, and like I said in the comment that I made, I still contend that when it's all said and done, the Big Ten doesn't care about these West Coast schools playing the Midwest. They just care about getting those TV markets. And once it's all said and done, and the mega conferences, the SEC absorbs Texas and the bottom half of the country, and the Big Ten absorbs the top half of the country. They're going to have these. They're going to have divisions that semi resemble what we know now, and it's all going to come back around. But people are really worried about it in the interim, and it is what it is. It's a legitimate gripe, but when it's all said and done, the TV contracts are going to win out, and I think it's going to take 5 to 10 more years before it kind of cycles through. And in the meantime, that's going to be logistically a nightmare.
I think you put a timeline. I think the timeline is 2036. 2036. I wonder what's going to happen, because that's I think where the current contract that the ACC holds within their schools expired, right, Jason?
That's correct. Yes. And so currently the ACC holds all the cards, but time is ticking, and the problem is these schools are going to make the jump, and it may not be next year, but schools like Florida State, Clemson, Miami, the ones that have the ability, I think Miami probably goes to the Big Ten. They fit academically with the Big Ten, and then Clemson and Florida State probably to the SEC. I think, and then plus, the SEC won't want 3 different Florida schools in one conference. It's bad enough that the ACC has 4 North Carolina schools. But I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to start to leave 2030, 2031. When those deals are starting to wind down a little bit, you're only going to lose X number of years. And then the rest of the conference knows that they're going to be making a ton of money back, and they'll probably help cover those fees or those losses for those new schools, because they are going to be bringing in just more money for everybody else as well. And so I think the ACC is okay for now, but the ACC needs to start poaching big time schools, whether it's going and getting the California schools from the Pac-12, whether it's just joining with the Big 12 and making a mega conference that's over like the middle of the country. That could work. There's a lot of different things, but somebody's got to get going fast, because both the Big 12 and the ACC are ticking time bombs, and nobody wants to be a part of either one of them moving forward. And that's the problem.
That's crazy. The big. Go ahead.
I just real quick. I think the Big 12 for now is fine. The teams that they add on, Colorado, the Arizona schools, Cincinnati, Houston, and I think they'll be fine for now. The ACC is the one on the clock, as Jason pointed out.
Yeah, I think the ACC has a lot of power coming from basketball. I think it's going to become the premier basketball conference. The problem is all the money is in football.
Go ahead, Nick.
And here's the thing, too. ACC and Big 12, I think, should also think about this from a basketball perspective. Because right now in the Big 12, with adding Arizona and Utah especially, that basketball conference is nuts, with Houston, with Baylor, with Texas Tech, Kansas. Those are all really good basketball schools. And if you merge that with the ACC, it would be just unbelievable. I'm trying to think with the logistics, because it'd be 14 teams from the ACC, 16 from the Big 12. So you'd literally have a 30-team mega conference. And
at that point, Nick, you would probably just have, because you have about an even split as it is. At that point, you could just merge the conferences and call it the ACC, or the Atlantic Division and the Big 12 Division, whatever you want to call it. You can just merge them under one TV contract, and that's all that you need to do, because that you can still have them playing amongst themselves, but as long as they take care of one another under one TV deal, that kind of takes them out of the fire.
We have a live listener. We'd love to take those questions. Aaron Young say, I want to do away with conferences. Everybody's independent, and you can build your schedule whoever you want at the end of the year. The committee picks 12 teams to play. that's not a bad scenario. I would counter. I think conferences are important because it give a sense of an accomplishment. I like having the Big 12 title, the SEC championship. I think it's add on to kind of like what is it about college football? You need to, fight for something. If everybody's independent, then everybody would just schedule an easy schedule, and then the committee would pick the team that won more games by 40 or 50 than put in the playoffs. You need to have conferences because, let's be real. You need to force those schools to play harder games because and I understand the coaches. They don't want to go out of their way and schedule harder games if they don't have to, because it can bite them in the ass. Like think about it. When Nick Saban scheduled Texas back to home and homes, games, probably he was thinking about getting an easy win because Texas was in a crisis. But last year they almost lost it, and this year I don't know.
Yeah, and I like to think that that would be in an ideal world a good scenario, as Aaron points out. But it works for Notre Dame, but not everybody is Notre Dame, and not everybody has an NBC TV contract. The entire reason that you want to have a conference to begin with is so you can have a collective TV contract with other schools to share the money from. It's not it is not easy to get yourself onto a major network, as it has been shown. Even Notre Dame had some problems before NBC came around. That is the thing. The only reason that conferences still exist are because groups of schools want to collectively get a TV deal and then play amongst themselves and reap the rewards. That's all it comes down to.
I mean, obviously, money drives everything, but just thinking from a competitive standpoint, winning a conference right now is a big deal. Winning the SEC, winning the Big Ten, winning the ACC, it's huge accomplishments. I mean, we talked about the Vols not winning a national title since 1998. The Vols have also not won an SEC title since 1998. And it would be huge just to get the SEC title first before even getting the national title. So I think going independent, that takes one less. That's one less thing you can win away. It's like taking away like the FA Cup from English soccer. Yeah, it's not the Premier League. Yeah, it's not the Champions League. Aaron says, I think winning the GoDaddy Bowl is a better accomplishment than some conference championships. I mean, if you could, I could talk about like the MAC, I guess. But I would contend that winning the SEC is way harder than winning the GoDaddy Bowl, right?
Well, yeah, but the SEC is not what he's talking about when he says some conference championships. The SEC is not some conferences. When you're talking the MAC, or when you're talking the Mountain West, even, or the Sun Belt, yeah, I think I would take the GoDaddy Bowl over those conference championships, because your best teams are going to be Northern Illinois, Western Michigan under PJ Fleck, JMU 3 years after becoming FBS, coming from FCS. I get what he's saying.
But but Jason, don't you think those schools also deserve an accomplishment within a competition within their kind of like the same school area or even school kind of uh, reality? That's why the MAC, Conference USA, they need to exist because without that, their schools literally wouldn't want anything. I love having smaller conferences because then because sports about a sense of accomplishment. You are competing for a title. If you remove conferences, then literally one school within 131 schools are going to be chanting champion. I don't like that idea.
I mean, the only way this would work is if you break up FBS into multiple subdivisions. I mean, and honestly, it feels like it almost is somewhat similar, right, to MLS, right? Like MLS just getting bigger and bigger and bigger with now 31 teams. And at a certain point, you have to break it up. There's too many teams. Like in FBS, it's getting to 131 teams, and we know the vast majority of those teams will never come close to winning a national title. No, they will never come close.
Well, that brings up a point that we discussed in Louisville last summer when conference realignment first started to pick up again. Is okay, once the Big 12, or sorry, the Big 10 and the SEC become 25 to 30 team mega conferences, and you have the top 45 to 60 schools in one umbrella, because obviously those are the top two conferences. They're the ones who have the TV money. At what point did they become the new FBS, and then everybody else just kind of, aligns together with their own championship and become the new FCS, and then FCS becomes the third level of D1 football. At what point does that become a reality? I think that's the way we're headed now.
And honestly, I think it'd be the way it should go. I mean, because I think right now we're wasting the max time, or wasting these Mountain West programs' time being classified in the same division as the SEC and as the Big Ten. Like, I really just don't understand what we're sitting here doing if we're not going to give them a shot at the playoffs, like you do in basketball, like you do in baseball. What we're doing, just having them sit here.
But I want to counterpoint Aaron Young, because again, he was talking about my point about keeping smaller conferences because of the title reward. You still play bowl games, really, really. If you ask, like, let's say Western Michigan fan or a Miami, I think Western Michigan, I think they were the. I remember they had some sort of success in college football, and if and they went to
Went to the Cotton Bowl, played against Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl in 2017, I believe, on the back of Corey Davis.
Yeah, Titans legend Corey Davis.
Yeah. They went to this big bowl game, but at the same time, don't you think they were proud of winning the MAC conference back in 2017? Or they were like,
I have a personal story here, Gus, to answer that question. All of my cousins went to Western Michigan, and they all had their Cotton Bowl shirts on. They didn't care that they won the MAC. They cared that they went to the Cotton Bowl. That's what I got from my family. But all of my family had Cotton Bowl shirts, and unfortunately, they didn't bring me one too. But I did get a Row the Boat shirt, so that was cool.
I guess it's a fair point, but I don't know. I still think sports about winning titles, and I guess there. I don't know what is more important in college football: tradition or titles. I don't know.
Money is the only thing that matters.
I know. Money is the number one, but I still think winning a conference should be a proud of accomplishment, not making a bowl game.
I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that it's not a big accomplishment. Go ahead.
First, Nick, then Jason. First, Nick, then Jason.
It's not. Nobody's saying it's not an accomplishment, but I think all Aaron's saying is some of these conferences are a lot less competitive than a matchup would be in the GoDaddy Bowl, which is a middle of the road bowl game that'll have a middle of the road Power 5 team and a pretty good G5 school.
Yeah.
And then also, do we take call-ins, because Aaron has a lot to say about this subject?
Well,
he said it's a lot to type out.
He wanted to join?
Well, I don't know if he wants to join, but he just texted me. He says he has a lot to say about this subject, and it's a lot to type out.
Oh, go ahead. Of course, send the link. We love to have guests. Come on, that's
yeah. Send the link. Get them on.
Our podcast is the most democratic sports podcast in the world. I mean, we talk literally about 2 countries, 2 Americas, all sports. We love to have the diverse guests all possible.
And this wouldn't be the first time that Aaron has joined myself and at least one of you guys. I think it was Nick. He joined us for Rock Solid a long time ago, and he talked about FCS football.
Yes, I was at the Hill, I believe.
Where
we were doing that show.
Where was I?
I think you had already left for Brazil.
Oh.
No, it's been longer ago than that. Now, Gus was definitely still there.
Probably was taking a night off. Probably was one of my rare night offs. Probably one of my really rare night offs.
Listen, well-earned nights off, might I add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh
I'll
yeah.
never forget the summer of 2020, how you were basically the only reason why the show was going.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That. I will see. Like I still get like pictures from that time. When you go to like Facebook on that day, and I still think about how crazy the world was 3 years ago. Like we're literally to this day, 3 years ago, we're celebrating that the SEC released the 10 game schedule, and we're like all happy about it because we
And then
thought
I was like,
Tennessee had.
the Vols are going to go 8-2 with this schedule. I couldn't have been more off with that prediction.
Jeremy Pruitt says otherwise.
Yeah, well, he's now a gym teacher about an hour away from me. So,
Hey, listen, I can't even fault him for that, though. How much courage do you have to go from being a head coach at one of the most storied programs in the history of college football to taking your L, becoming a gym teacher, and coaching middle school JV basketball? Look, he's got all my respect for that.
And what's funny is that he screwed up so bad that not even Nick Saban wanted to put him on a Nick Saban rehabilitation clinic.
well, he
I
Even
mean,
can't because
he's
of the
banned for
show
6 years, yeah.
what Nick and Jason.
So he can't because of the show cause. He's literally banned from NCAA football for 6 years.
Yep. He would, even if somebody hired him, it doesn't start until he is hired. So he's banned basically forever.
Yeah. And we welcome in special guest Aaron Young. Aaron, welcome to Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me join.
Of course, hey, if you can put your phone horizontally, that would be better for. Yeah, that's
All right.
awesome.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, come on, get your camera orientation right, scrub.
Well, I tried to get it on my Mac, but I don't have Chrome on my MacBook, so not yet. I'm downloading it now.
It's okay, but go. I love your take, also, Aaron. I love to discuss because I know if my Brazilian side of it that got grown up used to, with state championships in the soccer here, so we have multiple champions here, and I kind of compare that to college football, where conferences are kind of like that. It gives a sense of accomplishment to smaller schools. That's my say, but I understand your point that like maybe bowl games can become even bigger with that, with conferences folding from big like Pac-12 to smaller ones.
Well, so my thought is two things. So if you're a team like Cincinnati a few years ago, where you're good, you have Ritter coming back. They were good the year before or 2 years before.
Sauce Gardner too.
Building up to that run when they made the playoff. If I'm a team like that, I'm thinking, okay, I can load my schedule with teams like Ohio State, Michigan, those bigger name schools, because you're like, I want to build my resume so that when the college football committee looks at this, they're not like, well, should we leave them out because they're not playing these big schools? So you can load your resume up if you're a team that knows that in a year or two's time you could be really good. And then if you're a team like in a Power 5 conference, you ask any coach their goal, they'll say, yeah, we want to win the conference, but their goal 100% is to win the national championship. If all they do is win the conference, and they lose a bowl game, or they don't make the playoffs, they're like, well, we want more. We want to take that next step. So a conference championship is nice, but it's, to most coaches in Power 5, a stepping stool to where they actually want to go.
But no, yeah, for those schools I understand definitely. For Ohio, like for example, when Penn State won the Big Ten, I remember back in 2016, and they did not make the playoffs. It didn't feel a great season. It felt a season they came up short. For big schools, I understand. But how about the Max, even the Mountain West? Those schools. And for Jason's point, of course, there'll be bowl games to be proud of participating, like the Cotton Bowl. But you guys say in the chat, if bowl games are dead, how can they be more relevant to conference finals? That's my point.
Well, I think here's the thing. Over time, what has been considered successful has changed in college football because for a long time, national champions were chosen by men in a dark room somewhere. You would just get it in the newspaper one day and see what the final AP poll was, and that was your national champion. and then see what the final coaches poll was, and you get to see what your final national champion was. In a way, with the college football playoff era, we now get a true, undisputed national champion. But I feel like when you look at the way ESPN markets the sport, and I remember a long time ago, I went on like a TikTok rant about this, about how ESPN, from the beginning of the season, they're always promoting the CFP. And obviously, that's in their best interest to promote the college football playoff. They have the college football playoff. It's one of the biggest sporting events they have on their platform. But by putting so much emphasis on that, you're taking away from the rest of college football. You're taking away from the rivalries, from the traditions. And of course, as we have seen with some of the moves over the past couple of years, those things are becoming less and less important, at least on a national narrative. And that leads to people like Colin Cowherd saying, I don't care that Oregon doesn't get to play Oregon State anymore. I want to see Oregon play Michigan instead, Oregon play Ohio State instead. And we have to ask, is that the way we want this to go? Because, yes, we're going to get better matchups because of some of the realignment that we have seen. But are we okay that college football is going in that direction? And the logical part of my brain, honestly, is okay with it because I think we're going to get better matchups out of it. But the emotional part of me hates it for what college football used to be and what used to be important, because back in the day, if you won your conference, if you won the Pac-12, Pac-10, you got to go to the Rose Bowl. If you won the Big Ten back before 1998, you got to go to the Rose Bowl. If you won the SEC before 1998, you got to go to the Sugar Bowl. That was the tradition. But those traditions are meant to die eventually. And we are entering into that new era because, like, as I was telling someone earlier, 100 years ago, the permanent program in the state of Tennessee was fine. Up on Monument Mountain back in 1899, they beat 5 teams in 11 days and were undefeated. And they were national champions. But it's not 1899 anymore. And 20 is not even a D2 team, they're a D3. And, it's 2024, you're not going to have the Pac-10.
Now, I would like to get Aaron's take on something that I said just a few moments ago, where I said that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to, they're going to become these mega conferences, and eventually they're going to just be at the top level by themselves and shut everybody else out. And that leaves the rest of everybody else going to the second level, and then FCS potentially becoming the third level. And now, for those listening, Aaron played FCS football, and he played against some of the best teams in FCS, like North Dakota State and South Dakota, and the like. And so, with the best FCS teams, some of them making the jump up, like James Madison, for instance, and then the potential of the SEC and the Big Ten shutting everybody else out. Aaron, I want to get your take on what you think that looks like moving forward as somebody that's very familiar with, the structure of FCS football.
Well, the structure started to change. You really started to see it change with the transfer portal, like COVID. I think you saw a lot of the gap, I think, between FCS and FBS is closing, especially between the top team. North Dakota State can beat most Power 5 teams. Everyone will.
And you saw it, I don't know if it was last year, maybe it was 2021, where South Dakota beat Iowa.
South Dakota State. No, they lost. I called they were going to upset them, but they lost like 7-3.
And then somebody beat Kansas also.
Well, Kansas.
Kansas is Kansas, but
Kansas 4 years ago.
And didn't they blow them out too? It was like 41-24. It wasn't even close.
Which
it was
one?
A beatdown. I think it was like 21 back when it was the year before us. Because Kansas, remember last year they were decent,
right?
Or at least by their standards. But in 21, I want to say Kansas got just humiliated by. No, they beat South Dakota in 21. Who did they lose to? I can't remember what year it was, but they got blown out.
I remember also Old Dominion making good wins over Virginia, and I believe they are an FCS school, right?
Right. Well, William and Mary blew out Virginia last year, I believe.
So they lost to Kansas. Looks like lost to VMI, the Virginia Military Institute, in 2018 is what it's looking like.
They also lost to Nichols State in 2018.
Yeah, they thought about dropping the program.
That's so bad.
But as far as, I mean, the outlook is changing for sure. I mean, and then you think, how long is it? Because teams like Vanderbilt, I mean, yeah, they get beat. They lose consistently in the SEC. And so when you join these two power conferences and you get that, where like all these big name teams are all in the same conferences, whether it's the Big Ten or the SEC, the teams that lose all the time are going to get tired of it, I think. And then maybe those lower echelon of teams in each conference form the third conference, potentially something where they can go and actually where they're like, we have a chance to win. But
well, I mean, I think that's assuming that Vanderbilt cares about winning, which, I mean, they've been in the SEC since 1932, and they have 0 SEC championships. I mean, they're clearly
the championship Vanderbilt wins is going and cashing the SEC check.
Yep. And that's what matters, I think, to Vanderbilt. I mean, literally, Tennessee's going to waltz into their city in a couple of weeks and have more fans show up for a de facto home game than Vanderbilt will ever get for one of their home games. I mean, they're not even the most important college football team in their city.
Yeah, they're just like an example of somebody that would say, well, we should break off. And like the Big 12, I don't see the Big 12 necessarily dissolving. Because, I mean, I think teams like West Virginia and Kansas State and TCU are happy with where they're at.
Now, at what point do these mega conferences think about kicking out the Vanderbilts, the Rutgers, the Northwesterns of the world anyway?
But you got to think about how much money you're losing. Like if I'm Ohio State and I know how much money I get just off that TV deal, and then now you're splitting that pie not amongst 14 teams now or something like that. You're splitting it with 18 to 20 teams, and so your check just went from however tens of millions of dollars to maybe $10-15 million because you're splitting it so many different ways. They're gonna at some point, or maybe a team like Ohio State and Alabama, those really good teams can say we can get our own TV deal like Notre Dame has, so we can get a bigger check. It's hard telling how the money is going to change conference.
I think the only way you can go through with something like that, once you start to see the fallout of these big schools starting to not like that they're getting the same amount of money as Rutgers and Vanderbilt, is okay, you get your portion of the money that you brought in based on your market. And at that point, I think that could work. But at the same time, when you're the conference as a whole, I think it's more productive and you can probably get more money in a TV contract by kicking out a Vanderbilt and then bringing in another school like a Clemson if you're the SEC. Or if you're the Big Ten, kicking out Rutgers and getting Miami.
If they did that by market, Rutgers is in New York. They're literally in the biggest TV market. That's a sole reason why they're in the Big Ten is because, well, they just happen to be right next to New York. They could have picked Princeton and literally would have had the same effect, right? Like they would have, like being in New York is being in New York for Rutgers and for the Big Ten. Now, the other question with that is how much is that going to matter in the long term, especially when we head to an era of streaming? Because I know it just failed with the Pac-12 and Apple TV with their potential streaming contract there, but it's going to happen eventually where you're going to have one of these conferences have a non-insignificant amount of their games on a streaming platform. And in that case, back in the days of cable subscriptions, like when the SEC created the SEC network, it was important that you got as many geographic areas as possible for that to increase your revenue. That's why we brought in Missouri and Texas A&M. But in the era of streaming, is that still going to matter? Because I don't know if it's going to. And once that stops mattering, then that's when you can get rid of Rutgers. That's when you can get rid of Vanderbilt. Now, granted, in the SEC's case, getting rid of Vanderbilt doesn't change anything because you still got Tennessee. Getting rid of Northwestern doesn't matter for Big Ten because you still got Illinois technically. You got Wisconsin just across the border. Like it it wouldn't matter.
Even Purdue, just across the border into Indiana. You have all three surrounding areas around Chicago taken care of by the Big Ten. And to your point, the Vols are infinitely more popular in Nashville even than Vanderbilt is.
To that point, you think you use New York and Rutgers as an example. How many people in New York actually watch Rutgers football? No, next to nobody. Yeah. Unless they're playing like at Ohio State, and then they only watch because it's Ohio State. Northwestern being another example. So Indiana, we played Northwestern my last year, and it was obviously at Northwestern. So we're in Chicago. There was nobody there. I mean, granted, they were playing FCS level team. But nobody in Chicago, except unless you're an alumni, care about Northwestern football. You look at teams like Wisconsin's one that people probably tend to gravitate towards, and Illinois maybe, but not many people care about Northwestern football.
And I think that's a big deal when you bring that and circle that back around to what Nick was just saying about how if you have these streaming deals that are completely apart from TV markets, once you start to see the streaming platforms become the primary carrier of these conferences and of these events, the only reason that you bring in the TV market is because you get the money that you can charge for people in that area to put that channel on their subscription. Once that doesn't matter anymore, those schools are worthless. And, you could even say that they are attraction. They are actively losing money for you at that point. And I think to Nick's point, I think that's exactly right. It's at that point, once the tide starts to turn, that, streaming becomes the main carrier, the primary carrier. And that's an issue that's more of a TV issue than it is a sports issue. But regardless, when streaming becomes the primary carrier of television, that's when schools like Rutgers and Northwestern and Vanderbilt need to start panicking.
I also think, too, that could lead to a potential Super League situation. And I think this is where we're going to get to a head, and we'll have to choose an option. Do we go all in on Super League, or do we have a Europe-type backlash that prevents us from going into a Super League? Because I think in the United States, how just companies in general operate here, we have seen so many mergers, have seen just so many forms of industry across all sectors of the economy consolidate. I don't think there'd be anything stopping us from a situation where the top 10 teams of the SEC and the top 10s of the Big Ten decide they want to go into their own conference.
And to your point, Nick, speaking about the backlash and stuff, how about the National Collegiate Athletics Association? They don't have a say about it. Do you know what's stupid? The NCAA doesn't have a say about where the team plays, what conference the team are in, or scheduling. But they punish teams. How can be because, for example, the NFL set out punishments for NFL teams, but they, kind of have all the rest, scheduling, manage the league. But the NCAA doesn't manage college football, but they punish college football teams. At some point, the NCAA, I don't know, they're gonna part themselves with college football.
I think we've already begun to see that. In a de facto sense, the NCAA already has no power. These schools are following these punishments in good faith. Because if there was a school that gave the NCAA the middle finger and said, we're not doing that, there's literally nothing that they could do. Because you'll get court systems involved. Even going into what the Vols had, the Attorney General of the state of Tennessee threatened legal action against the NCAA should they punish Tennessee with a bowl ban. It's things like that prevent the NCAA from having any permanent power, especially now that we're starting to see the death of the NCAA as we knew it to begin with.
What it reminds me of, just a historical comparison, it's like the League of Nations between World War I and World War II. Like how just completely worthless as an organization they were. They couldn't stop anything from going wrong in World War II. Now, obviously, this is nowhere near as serious, but the NCAA is not going to be able to stop anything. The train has left the track, and there's nothing they can do to bring back this whole idea of student amateurism. And I wouldn't be shocked if, for the next 5 to 10 years, we start seeing new organizations be created from the ashes of the NCAA.
So here's a situation to ponder. So you look at the college basketball tournament, and let's say just with the conferences the way they are now, where you still have a few of them, like a lot of conferences. Could you do something like the NFL season's pretty long? It goes till February. Could you do a situation similar to that, where maybe each team gets an automatic bid into a playoff, and kind of stop this or slow it down?
Well, that's what I personally have advocated for a long time, because as someone who in our city, Chattanooga, we have the mocks, right? So I'm familiar with FCS from the SoCon perspective, and so I've been to several FCS playoff games where the mocks have made it, and I've always been really intrigued by the 2014 tournament. You see it in the FCS, and I've always wondered what that would look like on the FBS level. And I almost wonder, we're getting to 12 next year, so we're literally at now half of what FCS has. I mean, you got to just wonder, especially when people see these home playoff games on home stadiums, people are going to be clamoring for more of that, I feel like. Because college – go ahead.
I was just saying, no question. I was agreeing with you.
And I think that it's important to think about this as well in the TV contract sense, because once it becomes more profitable for a network to have that playoff than it is to have that last, whatever it is, the SEC plays 8 games, they'd have to drop it to 7, something to that effect. Once it becomes more profitable for a network to have the playoff, then it becomes for the conferences to have that last playoff or that last conference game, and you drop the schedule by 1 week, then it's going to be an opportunity that you're going to have where it really becomes realistic, in my view.
You could think about this. So, like, you see college basketball. How many college basketball games are shown on TBS or True TV during the year? None. You could do a thing where the first round of like with the FCS playoffs, that scenario, where the first round of the FCS playoffs is played on TBS and True TV and TNT and stuff like that. And then you have those networks paying money to broadcast games, and you just trickle down from there, just like college basketball does. I don't know how financially, I mean, I'm sure you get more money generated from that.
I mean, the ratings would be bonanzas. I mean, it would be March Madness in December.
And to guys' point, I mean, and it's easy to make those kind of things. The committee already have a top 25 kind of rank. So just put everybody in, and you play a playing game between the 25 and the 24. Then whoever wins goes to the playoffs, like the NCAA does. Their first playoff games are not actually the tournament itself, but it to got into the tournament kind of thing.
And what you're going to have is all these bowl presidents now getting all up in arms because you're basically destroying the bowl game. But, Jason and I were talking about this in the comments. Bowl games in themselves are frankly irrelevant. Like, outside of the 2 playoff games and the playoff games that you personally care about with your teams, how many bowl games did you really watch outside of those? I didn't watch very much.
Or the bowl presidents could make make bowl games playoff games.
Yep, that's exactly where I was about to go with it, Gus. You could put these games at neutral sites and have that TV money and have those bowl games actually mean something again. If you have the first and the second round of the playoffs in these different bowl games, and you have the rotating cycle that you have for the New Year's Six, but once you get to the final 4 teams, that's when you start to have your New Year's Six games. But all the other bowl games, they could negotiate individual contracts to host these playoff games, and then the playoff committee just sends them 2 teams that geographically, or sends them a matchup between 2 teams that geographically makes a little bit of sense. I think that there's all the sense in the world in that.
See, here's what I would do in a 2014 playoff. your first and second rounds, so you go from 24 to 16, those would both be on campus. That way, every single one of the top 16 teams has a chance to host a playoff game. And then starting at the quarterfinals, 4 of the 6 New Year's Six games would be sites for the quarterfinals. The other 2 would get to host the semis, and then you choose a separate site for the national title. That's how I would do it.
And just choose it like they do now, like they do the Super Bowl. You just have a rotating list of 6 or 8 places that you like to have the championship.
And I guess the bowl games will become kind of like the NIT is for college basketball.
I think so.
I mean that's what would happen, but I think that there's a lot more interest, and I think there's a lot more incentive for these bowl games and the people that promote them to get in on that college football playoff. But I think that's going to be financially a lot more feasible than having extra hosting games at campus sites. Although I think it's it would provide an incentive to be in the top 12 rather than the top 24. But
and I do have to ask this, but I've seen people make the argument, if we move to this format, it's just going to devalue the regular season because now you can lose a game or 2 and your season isn't over. But I'll argue this: by the time we reach November, how many games actually matter in the national championship conversation? Like by the time you get to like the last 2 to 3 weeks, there's not that many games when you get there that really matter in the grand scheme of the national championship conversation. Like I remember like looking through some of these, last 2-3 weeks and thinking about all the games that could have championship implications, but don't because we only have a 14 playoff.
The 2021 season, I think, was the best example of what it could be because you had all 5 Power 5 conference championship games at once, and all but one of them had potential playoff implications, even in a 4-team playoff. But you don't get that every year. Without expanding the playoff, which of course is going to happen, but without doing that, those games already are not very highly valued to begin with. But in the case of the 2021 season, those became de facto playoff games already, which just goes back to my point. You just drop one game off the regular season and you play the same amount, you can add a playoff in. And then if you want to have, bowl season among the rest of the bowl games that don't have playoff games, you can do an NIT style thing where you didn't get to go to the big show, but we'll still let you play a neutral site game. You get to go to Hawaii or whatever and enjoy this neutral site. It's not that much different than it is right now, but financially it would make a lot of sense for the promoters of the bowl games and for the schools that are involved to get involved at that type of level, in my personal opinion.
I think another benefit to like a larger playoff is something that a different way to look at it would be how many players you think would get exposure to play at the next level. Like, Jason, you remember Touchdown Tommy or was it Touchdown Timmy from Montana State?
Touchdown Tommy, yeah, number 16.
Blew up, went viral from his performance in the playoff. Nobody had heard of this dude before the FCS playoffs. So, like, if a guy from, for example, like Cincinnati goes and shows out against a Big 12 or an SEC school, scouts will see that. I mean, and I think it benefits the players in that aspect. It benefits the schools because there's more opportunity for more money. And then I like what you were saying, Nick, about the top 12 teams host. And then the play-in tournament, just like how the NBA does, perfect. I think that'd be awesome.
I mean, it really excites me. And I know it's radically different from what college football was built on, but I think it's time for a change of college football because clearly, obviously all 4 of us, we're all diehard college football fans. We love college football. We're going to watch it no matter what. But, a lot of people out there are not. And you have to think about how do you get the casual fan more interested? And expanded playoff would get them more interested, especially when you get to December and the NFL is in its playoff push. in the last couple of weeks heading into their playoffs, and of course, everyone is interested to see who makes it to the Super Bowl. I think if you're college football, this is a way to kind of counteract that in December and really make more buzz about you. And you can do a lot of this during the holiday season and really just make it a tradition amongst yourself.
I think a big way to do that is, increasing the parity in the game. And I think a direct way to do that, to inject parity into the game, is to expand the playoff. Because for a while, you saw the effect of having the 4-team playoff. You saw the effect of that in the first few years were all the same 4 or 5 teams every year. It was Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State. Those were the teams. And then every once in a while you had an Oregon in there, you had a Florida State in there.
Cincinnati at TCU.
Yeah, Cincinnati and TCU, but mostly you had the same few schools competing because all the recruits went to those schools because they wanted a chance to play, and that was their best chance. Now that you have an expanded playoff, you're going to start to see these kids go everywhere else, and obviously NIL plays a big role in that as well. But increasing the parity is a direct way to increase the casual fan viewership because you're going to have diehards, but maybe it's just an alumni of their school that wants to watch, and they have a chance to play, or this person wants to watch a good football game, but they're just burnt out on watching Alabama play against Clemson. So now you've got more programs involved. Maybe they live in a state that has a college football program and they want to root for it. Any number of ways.
Notre Dame's a great example of that. I mean, living in Indiana especially, you never see more Notre Dame T-shirts than when they made the playoff.
Ever.
If you looked at last year's ratings, I mean, Tennessee was in 3 or 4 of the top 10 ranked or rated games of the entire year. I mean, people wanted to watch the Vols last year. I mean, partially because of the offense and, the amount of big games that we ended up playing, especially, with Alabama, Georgia, just had some monumental games. And people want to see that new blood. And obviously, if Tennessee is in it for multiple years in a row, obviously that effect will subside. But, Texas, if Texas goes out and, beats Alabama, yeah, their ratings are going to go bonanza for the rest of the season because people are going to want to watch the Longhorns, a really good Longhorns team play.
100%, especially now that Arch Manning on roster, whether he starts or not, people are going to buy tickets. People are going to want to watch the games in case he does get in.
Yeah, and obviously 2 years, We'll see if hopefully he gets to play an entire game against Bama this year because he would have torched them. He would have torched them last season.
Something about playing Alabama, they love to hurt our starting quarterback in the first quarter.
Yeah, it's a trend, but hopefully I'll be definitely rooting for the Longhorns though when they go to Tuscaloosa, as I basically root for any team that plays against the Tide.
I can only remember one time after I went to college where I actively rooted for Alabama, and it was when they played Clemson. Any other matchup, can't do it. But Clemson's on that level for me.
I'm going to be honest, when they played Georgia in the national title, part of me wanted Bama to win because I really, really did not want Georgia getting that title because now they're just an unfettered monster. Because they got one, now it feels like they're going to go on a run of getting a couple. And I really did not want Georgia getting that one title.
This year was almost a gimme, if you ask me. I mean, how does TCU make it? They lost in the Big 12 championship, and if I remember, it was a blowout to Kansas State.
It was overtime. It was overtime.
It was overtime.
They were losing by a lot and came back.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. They had a terrible first half, and the quarterback saved the day.
Yeah, I mean, come on. That's the situation where you watch that game and you think, do they deserve to be in the playoff? And it helps when you have an 8-year college football playing quarterback.
I'll say this: Max Duggan for TCU. Really, he was basically like Tim Tebow and the Broncos, right? Wasn't really pretty to watch, but it just felt like they kept on finding miraculous ways to win. But then ultimately, when they played a real team, got just absolutely drugged. Kind of like with Tebow and the Patriots.
Yeah. It's situated like there's sometimes where I scratch my head at the committee and who they pick. Like we think, like when Notre Dame made it, for example, I think everybody knew that they were not. You you look at their schedule, they play like ACC schools mostly, with a couple like Stanford they play every year. I think they were not on the level of an Alabama and an Ohio State, and that's why they continuously get embarrassed when they make it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and those questions will even be rose again in a more expanded field. But I think in a 2014 playoff, you're gonna see the best teams make it, and you're gonna have better semifinals, better quarterfinals. And so there's arbitrary stuff because someone would have beaten TCU early on, someone would have beaten Notre Dame early on.
Oh,
Because you have teams that get hot. Like I think about for example, the 2012 Texas A&M team, the one of Manziel. Like they were playing on fire towards the end of that season, and because they had their losses early. Because I think they lost to Florida week 1, and I think they lost to LSU really early in the season. But they won the rest of their games, and of course they had beaten Bama. And I always wondered what they would have done in an expanded playoff because I thought that they would have made it, and I think they would have done some damage. And
UCF, another example, with Scott Frost.
Yeah. Damage that they could have done too. I mean, there's so many possibilities, and we see runs all the time. Like in the NFL, even we see a team be the 5th, 6th seed, and they make a run. Like we've seen the Giants win 2 Super Bowls as a 6th seed.
Okay, let me stop you real quick though. Let's pump the brakes on that because let's be honest. There's a big difference between having 53 professionals on your team and 75 amateurs on your team. There's a big difference in the talent level in college football, whereas in the NFL, the talent level is all still pretty much the same. We like to clown on the Cleveland Browns or the 2008 Detroit Lions for going 0-16, but they would still steamroll. They would still be competitive in most games and steamroll any college team. So
his point is just, the skill level would be pretty much the same. You have 75 amateurs from UCF playing 75 amateurs from Alabama. It's just an example.
Well, okay. Well, here's the scenario I'm thinking. Let's say you have a rebuilding SEC team, right? You can pick any SEC team. Let's say they lose 2 games out jump. They finish 9-3, 10-2. But they get a lot better by the end of the year. They make it in as the 18 seed or whatever. I mean, that's a team that still is a top 5 team in talent, and they could make a deep run as a 9-3 team. I mean, those are the type of scenarios I could see playing out in this hypothetical.
I feel like LSU last year is a pretty decent example of that. They lost to us last year, and they had a very competitive game against Florida State. I believe they beat Florida State in that game, but the point remains, you had a couple of very competitive games, one of which you lost, and then you come back and still do very well and end up ranked pretty highly at the end of the day. And so I think that's a good point.
It's, as I said, the more games you play, the more opportunities for craziness you have. And I do think it's going to be.
They did lose, by the way. They did lose.
Yeah, it was the block. It was on an extra point block.
Could you also do this? I know soccer fans in this will appreciate this idea. The best FCS team plays an FBS team. Say they get to pick a conference they want to join, and they have to play one of the teams in that conference. Imagine you go play at Vanderbilt and you beat them. Then North Dakota State's down the SEC and Vanderbilt's FCS. Now financially,
oh my god, give me relegation all day long.
Relegation.
Please.
Hey, I would love it. I couldn't even imagine how funny. Now, granted, in 2017, Tennessee would have been on the cusp of relegation when we went 4-8.
Yeah, when you lost to Georgia State, was it?
No, that was 2019. That wasn't the same year.
Don't open that wound.
I'm a Texas fan. My wound's been open since 2010.
Your wound has been open since A.J. McCarron got hurt.
You mean Colt McCoy?
Yes, you knew what I meant. and AJ McCarron beat you because Colt McCoy was hurt.
Yeah, and I had to listen to freaking Brent Musburger rave about his girlfriend the entire. No, that was a Notre Dame game. That was the wrong. That was the wrong national title game.
Can't say I blame Brent or Brett, whatever his name is. I love it when that pops up on Twitter for me, and they show that he's on there, and they show AJ McCarron's girlfriend and Musburger drooling on the mic.
Yeah, I mean that's old school college football right there when he was calling the games. I mean, I've grown to like Fowler as a commentator, but Musburger was like old school college football. But anyway, we're talking about promotion and relegation. Yeah. It would be a very cool idea, and I think you would have to do it. You would basically have to partner up conferences, and you have to figure out what conferences you would partner up.
And see, this is the perfect scenario though when the Big Ten and the SEC have these super conferences. Okay, here's the top division, here's the second division, and it's all one conference. You could have 30 teams, and then the top 15 are in the top division, and the bottom 15 are in the bottom division, and you could go with something like that. That's not that far fetched when you have, the two conferences in the arms race that they're in right now.
I guess then the contention becomes, how do you initially choose your top 15? I mean, I think that's definitely the contention because, you can sit here and think about, if let's say the SEC and the ACC merged. All right, let's pick the top 15 teams from a combined SEC and a combined SEC ACC merger.
I think you have to just give the teams that were already in the SEC because the SEC would be doing the absorbing here. I think you just have to take the SEC teams and make them Division I, and then make the ACC teams Division II, and then the ACC teams that are good, your Clemsons of the world are going to be the ones that just, they win and move up. And that's as straightforward as it can get.
Yeah, I think that's what you'd have to, but I can only imagine the boosters at a Florida State, at a Clemson. I feel like they would be unless they're just in a desperate situation like Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford, and Cal are in right now. I feel like that's the only way you could ever get them to agree to be in a Division II and not have to fight for promotion. Because we can't even get our soccer league to even agree to promotion and relegation. Can you imagine trying to convince a bunch of Southern boosters to do a promotion or relegation?
Yeah, but the SEC holds all the cards here, though. If the SEC wants to do it, they're the ones that have the decision-making power because they have the money. And where the money goes, everyone will follow.
I mean, tell them boosters to cut a bigger check. You don't want to – you got to bump up the money. You don't want to risk relegation.
At Texas A&M, it doesn't always work.
Come on,
absolutely.
We need Nick Benjamins.
Absolutely,
Nick Benjamins.
Nick Benjamins. But I guess before we begin to wrap up here on this topic, the question I had put on our liner here is, how much will we miss the Pac-12? And in terms of its impact on college football, in terms of whatever membership. Yeah.
We won't, because the teams that are worth a shit are going to be in good conferences, and the ones that nobody cared about are going to be irrelevant still. I mean, I don't think the conglomeration that is the Pac-12 is going to be missed in and of itself.
Yeah, no one's going to miss the Pac-12. People make jokes about the Pac-12 to begin with.
Yeah, and that's the reason why, college football will well outlive it, because outside of these dramatic people online who are like, oh, the Pac-12 dying is a sign that college football itself is dying. I'm like, no, it's just a sign that it's about to get a whole lot more entertaining.
I mean, they will talk about it missing it until the first big matchup of Oregon, Ohio State, and everybody will be like, oh my God, why we didn't do this before?
Yep. Exactly, and like they're going to cry about Pac-12 leaving, but they're not going to sit down and watch Washington State play Arizona this year. So,
like I said, the only teams anybody cares about and that are worth anything are the ones that are going to be moving anyway. You're still going to get to care about them. They're just going to be playing more games that you care to watch instead of watching Oregon just beat the dog shit out of Cal Berkeley.
Exactly. I think Cal Berkeley, honestly, they're not going to even have a football program in like 5 years. If you look at their financials and stuff, it's not pretty. And losing the Pac-12 money. And it was funny is apparently them and Stanford were going to go to the Big Ten, but Fox said no. At least that's the rumor. Like Fox said, we don't want Stanford or Cal because no one cares and no one watches them play.
And you can get more competitive and better markets types of schools that have the academics that match with the Big Ten. Miami is a great example. That is the perfect addition to the Big Ten based on markets and based on being competitive and based on academics that fit the Big Ten bill.
I have an idea for our conference. Hear me out. Stanford, Vanderbilt, maybe
Wake Forest.
Yeah, Wake Forest, Stanford, Vanderbilt, Wake Forest. I don't
Northwestern,
know.
Rice.
Yeah.
And just and combine them with the Ivy schools.
Yeah.
Yes, Purdue going to Harvard. That is the perfect conference.
Put all of the nerd schools together, and then make them play against the Ivy League for the toilet bowl every year. I mean, listen. When your school has produced more people that have gone to the moon than have become champions, that's a problem at Purdue. I mean, I don't know whether that's badass or sad.
Well, I mean, they can go to the moon, but they can't beat Farley Dickinson. So, I mean, hey, how many Purdue Boilermakers does it take to beat Farley Dickinson? Or Fairley, or however you say it. However you say it.
Purdue is catching strays tonight, and it's my fault.
No, I'm here to hate Purdue.
I'm here to hate Purdue, too. But,
oh, my gosh.
I want to know, though. I want a round table vote here. Is it more badass or is it more sad that Purdue has produced more men that have walked on the moon than have won a basketball championship?
I think
it's badass. Like going to the moon is like one of the greatest achievements in the history of mankind. You know, it makes it even more the perplexing that they can't beat Farley Dickinson.
Purdue's known for bad upsets. Didn't they lose to like Little Rock one year? Arkansas.
And they lost to North Texas.
I love watching Purdue basketball in the tournament. That's every year I make a bracket. That's my upset bid every single year.
I mean, the most clutch athlete they've ever produced was Drew Brees and Ryan Newman when he was like qualifying on pole every week.
We had to get a NASCAR reference in, didn't we? It wouldn't be the show without at least one.
I mean, you guys rip all you want Purdue, but as sad as it is, I still don't forget about that night in 2019.
Me either. Yeah. Me either. I just don't like to talk about it.
What are you guys talking about?
Well, there's multiple multiple run-ins we've had with those people.
The basketball, the March Madness loss, that was a hard one to swallow.
Well, it's not just that either. I literally went in person. I went in Jason's place to watch us lose to Purdue in overtime. Because we didn't have a secondary worth for crap.
Yeah, and I ended up getting this, and you got tickets.
Yeah.
Did I not send you a Snapchat when I was putting up graphics at Ross Aid of their cow catcher graphic that they put up with the new updated bowl wins?
You did. And their phony baloney Music City Bowl win.
Well, at least we went on to a New Year's Six bowl and they lost 63-7 this year in their bowl game, and Louisville stole their coach. So,
Look, you used to be able to put men on the moon, but now you can't even put men into the conference championship game. So,
yeah,
who's the real winner here?
It's very sad indeed to be at Purdue, and they still have to go back to Lafayette, Indiana.
Man, I'm glad my grandpa doesn't listen to this show like he listened to Rock Solid, because he would be on me right now. Shout out to my Peapod, 2-time Purdue alumni.
I'm going to go on record right now. The next time Tennessee plays them in a major sporting event, we are winning.
Yeah. I'm just surprised. My grandparents have been married for over 60 years, and their marriage was in a little bit of doubt during that night in the Sweet 16 against Tennessee, because my grandpa is a 2-time Purdue alumni, and my grandma is from Harriman, just outside of Knoxville. Lifelong Tennessee Vols fan, and that may have been the end of their marriage had it gone a different way.
Nick, I got ask, how confident are you in that take? Because we can put your money where your mouth is and say if Purdue wins, you got to wear like a Purdue shirt or something on the next show.
I mean, I'm very confident. Now, I don't know when that's going to happen. Like, it might not happen for 20 years, but I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll wear that Purdue shirt if we happen to run into the Boilermakers again in a major sport and lose.
I think it's bound to happen. Maybe in like basketball, or even baseball. Maybe.
Does Purdue have a baseball team?
I think so. That's actually
the fact we have to even ask means that they're not losing in baseball.
I'm not worried about baseball. It'd be basketball more than likely. I think football will trim back down to what Purdue normally has been. So most likely it's basketball. And falls basketball. They've been in Italy for the last week, and they actually can shoot the ball, at least in Italy. Now, granted, they're playing like the Lithuania under-21 and like some Stella Arizia or something. I don't know. I probably butchered their name. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. Will probably not translate to great offensive success back in the States when they're playing college basketball. But hey, I can dream.
Hey,
I can hope.
I saw some pictures from that. I have one of my tailgate friends went with her Italian boyfriend. Apparently, that game was in his hometown. How wild is that? And they went and they met. They were the only Tennessee fans there, and they got to meet the team and Rick Barnes. Crazy,
right? Hopefully they learned how to shoot the basketball, and they can bring that back with them. Because here's the thing: like I know a lot of people heading into this year gonna be like, all right, I am putting zero faith into basketball because I know what happens every single March, and logically, more than likely they'll get a high seed, and then maybe make it to the Sweet 16, and just in Rick Barnes fashion, not make it any further. But if any team is going to do it, it's got to be this one. Because of all the experience that's coming back, the only question is, can they be consistent enough offensively? And we'll have to wait and see.
I'd say last year you guys get a little bit of a pass in basketball because the guy Ziegler got hurt right before the tournament. I mean, you don't plan for your best player to get hurt weeks before the tournament. If he's healthy, who knows? I mean, you guys probably make a deeper run.
And honestly, it was we probably went further than we should have. I mean, we beat Duke because of Olivier Kamwa. Insane performance there in the second round and shutting down Derek Lively. He didn't score at all. And Duke just had a really, really bad game plan. I mean, they had the size advantage and they didn't utilize it whatsoever against Tennessee. It was really wild to see. But FAU, credit to them, they pressured us and they forced into a lot of mistakes and just did not allow us to sell it up in offense. So I don't think last year's team would have won the title. So it doesn't hurt as bad as like that Purdue team because I think that team had the capability of winning it. Now, granted, we would have had to play Virginia in the Elite Eight, and that would have been a very difficult game. So I don't know if that team wins a title.
I think there's every shot in the world that particular Tennessee team may have been Deacon Rick's best team he's ever coached, most talented. And now I know at Texas he had a team that had Kevin Durant and DJ Augustine, but you think about the level of talent across the board that 2019 Tennessee team had. There was a lot more talent spread across a lot more players than he had at Texas with DJ Augustine and Kevin Durant.
I'll tell you, the most important, there are two players I think are going to be X factors for this team. Toby Awaka, who I think had flashes of really good play last year, but I think could become a really, really big role player for this team this year. Maybe even start by the end of the year. And Freddie DeLoyne, because Freddie DeLoyne is going to be effectively the backup point guard to Sakai Ziegler. And we need to have more than one true point guard. And I really think that those two players will be huge. And I think, for Sakai, I want to see him be smarter. Because, obviously he's the most explosive player Tennessee has. And he's a smart player. But, I remember Jason and I, we went to the Missouri game. And we were watching this game. And there were multiple times where we remarked to each other, why would he do that? Why is he playing hero ball? And it was frustrating to watch. Because, we knew he was a really, really good player and the most creative player that we had, but sometimes he put us in bad spots.
Yeah, I try not to remember that night. That was a bad week for Tennessee basketball. Back-to-back buzzer beater losses. Yeah,
and off Austin P buzzer beater.
No, that's
seeing two buzzer beaters in 1 week.
Shout out to the Govs. I think that's the most professional I think I've ever had to be. You saw me, Nick, and all of you guys have probably seen the video at this point that I put on TikTok. I reacted very badly to losing on a buzzer beater, and then I had to get on the mic. Whatever his name was, BJ. His name was BJ something.
I can't remember what his name was because I had never even heard of the school, Queens. And because I'm thinking, okay, I'm going up there, going to see you do your thing. And I'm like, I wasn't expecting the game to be any good. But then I got an all-time classic of a game. Because I'm not emotionally invested in Austin Peay, but it was crazy.
Oh, boy.
I got to go to more games where I have no emotional investment in the team.
Now, Jason, remember EKU versus Indiana State football, that game you went to?
Oh, yeah. I think, the game that Aaron is referencing is a game that it was the only game I ever got to see him play at Indiana State because he was at Indiana State while I was at Tennessee. And so scheduling, prevented a decent matchup, except for against EKU in Richmond, Kentucky, which is about a 3-hour drive from Knoxville. And I went up, and if I remember correctly, it's a fairly close game, but EKU pulls out to a 2-score, a 10-point lead. And then close to the end of the game, Indiana State takes the lead back. And then 5 minutes left or less, EKU takes the lead with another touchdown. And then, let's see, Kurt.
Kick.
They tried an onside kick and gave what's Kurt's last name?
Kurt Wilderman.
Yeah, so Kurt Wilderman, the quarterback for Indiana State, the backup quarterback, might I add, leads them down the field and then with 2 seconds left throws a 35 or 40-yard dot. And then whatever his name was from Chicago, Faison McClurge, goes up there and he catches the ball over his head and he gets hammered and then he just reaches the ball over his head and barely crosses the line. And then I'm just sitting there. I'm sitting next to some lady who's married to one of the coaches at Indiana State, and there's 40 of us there, if that. There's a couple of rows of people that were Indiana State people, and they put the signals for a touchdown, and that's the end of the game, and all of us go crazy, and everybody else gets mad and starts yelling, obscene things at us. And then Aaron, who was the student section's best friend that game, decided to let them have it a little bit. It was a lot of fun. Best football game I've ever seen.
To kind of reference it, you remember David Tyree's helmet catch in the Super Bowl? So picture that he catches it at the 1, and when he falls back with the ball on his helmet, it ends up over the goal line to win the game.
It was crazy. I have a video of it, and I'm looking for it on my Instagram right now because I definitely posted it.
I have my own wild memory of an Indiana State football game because the first playoff game that Chattanooga played in 30 years back in 2014 was against Indiana State. So I went to that game, and the Mocs won, I think, by like 3 touchdowns. But there was this really crazy kick return that Indiana State had because we had just gone up, I think, like 3 touchdowns or something. And UTC didn't have a good kicker, so they squibbed it. And hold on, let me see this. Wait.
You can't even. Yep. Oh, it was awesome. You can.
Show me again.
He got murdered on that ball.
You're right. You can barely see it, but Faison McClurge brings it down for the trees.
Man, that is unbelievable.
Like how he managed to come from behind from all those D-line, like from all those defensive players. Like, it was nuts.
I'm going to send it to you guys so you can watch it on your own phones. But I did want to make sure that it got out to the podcast because it was one of the best things I've ever seen. It was unbelievable.
Only thing that would have made it better is if the post-game meal was a little better. But
This man, Aaron, handed me his entire post-game meal while he went to go get a fork, and he trusted me with it because it looked that bad. I didn't eat a single bite of it. It just didn't look good. It wasn't good.
Absolutely, but we've had a great discussion here on the end of the Pac-12 and what it means for the future of college football. A truly special episode of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, episode 89 here on August 7th, 2023.
I'm fine not talking about Brazilian sports because I'm mad about Rio Branco's performance on Saturday. We got robbed. I think, Nick, I don't know how much you watched the game, Nick, but we got robbed. We got really robbed.
Yeah, I was doing because I'm about to move into an apartment here in a few weeks, so I'm getting things organized. So I had the game on in the background, and I saw Rio Branco get scored on, but I couldn't really speak to it. And we were also going to talk a lot about the U.S. women's team tonight and Brazil's. Obviously, both of our teams.
They don't deserve to be talked about. Neither one of them do.
Oh yeah, neither one. Yeah. My comment be brief about Brazil. Like, they need a rebuild. Marta's generation is done. She's done a lot of great things for women's soccer in Brazil. But
Marta. Boo Marta.
Yeah.
Also, boo Megan Rapinoe as well. Why was she on the field? Why was she on the field as well? And this has nothing to do with politics. She should have not been on the field whatsoever because she is beyond washed. And frankly, the rest of the forwards for the U.S. women's team should be ashamed as well because none of them could finish at all around the net. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I mean, to dominate Sweden like that and still lose is mind-boggling. Like, literally, your goalkeeper, Alyssa Nera, should have been out there shooting. It should have been a forward instead of a goalkeeper because clearly she could shoot on net better than the forwards could. So
I'm just glad they 4 a.m. That way I can sleep through them and catch the Spark Notes version the next morning. Not be so disappointed.
Yeah, I'm glad I do not have to make that decision now on Friday. So I can now just ignore the rest of this World Cup because of the crappy time zone and hope that we never have a men's World Cup or Olympics in this time zone.
Yeah, we can all agree no major event in the east part of the world. Sorry Japan, sorry China, sorry Australia, sorry New Zealand. You guys are great, but out here in the West, we can't watch when you guys host a big sporting event.
Absolutely. I know we just sound like spoiled Americans right now, man. Like, everything should always revolve around us. But frankly, in this scenario, it should.
Tell me this man sounds like a spoiled American. Gus does not sound like a spoiled American. This man does not sound anything like a
No,
spoiled
I,
American.
I love American hosting tournaments. The time zone is practically the same. I cannot wait for the FIFA Club World Cup in 2025 in the United States of America. I cannot wait. It's gonna
Hey,
Yeah,
be
because I'm gonna be able to actually watch it.
we got to get you a visa so you can come to some of the games.
I'm finding ways. I am planning. I'm more excited about that than the World Cup itself because for me it meant more to watch big time games like Palmeiras Real Madrid, Flamengo Chelsea. Those are the kind of matchups people be here like be going crazy in Brazil. Like I cannot wait for 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. I just say
And
that.
Absolutely, it's going to be a couple of lit summers here in the U.S. soccer wise.
Go ahead,
But
Jason.
yeah, Gus, you already know you got two people here willing to sponsor your visit and give you a place to stay.
Uh,
We gotta submit an app now at this
No,
point.
no.
We gotta
I
figure
am.
it out.
Good news is I was approved for ESTA. I have an Italian citizenship as well. So I don't know if I told you guys, but I'll be going to the US in December.
Hell yeah, let's go.
let's go. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
didn't know
think
that. But
I think I told you, Nick, that if Tennessee makes it to the college football semifinals, I'm willing to beg for inheritance of my parents or whatever to me. I want to go to the Tennessee college football semifinal game. I don't know what I have to do it, but I'll do it.
Hey, we'll
yeah,
find a way.
yeah, I do think it's an outside shot of that happening. But hey, it would be a lot of fun. But on next week's the 90th episode of Contenders to Americas, we'll get back into more football previews. I actually have the Pac-12 up for football previews tonight. We'll do that next week, and the
No.
AFC West.
I'll vote. It's okay. We already did Pac-12 today. Pac-12, rest.
Well, I
Rest.
mean, I think the football is going to actually be really good. I really want to talk about like USC and Oregon and Washington because those are all I think going to be really good teams. I think Oregon State's going to be fascinating to watch this year.
I was gonna joke. Let's do the Pac-12 division of Big Ten preview.
Yeah, I guess real quick, who is winning the conference? Because honestly, I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to say Oregon wins the Pac-12 this year.
USC is gonna steamroll with year 2 of Lincoln Riley.
Well, not if they
Still
have a
Bo
defense.
Nix?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Oregon's, do they still have Bo Nix, or did he graduate this last year?
They do. They still have Bo Nix.
Yeah, they're winning the conference.
Which is crazy because he sucked at Auburn, but hey, I mean he's really good. But watch out for Washington. Washington could win it. Utah, obviously, they still have Cam Rising. Although they did lose some pieces from that team last year, I think that's going to be tough for them. Oregon State, depending on how DJ Ujalele plays, that's a dangerous team too. They won 10 games last year. They upset Oregon in that last game, almost upset USC in Corvallis. And I think Oregon State is going to have such a crazy big chip on them now because they're going to feel like they were the team that got left behind by everybody else. I think that's going to be very fascinating to watch. And the Beavers are all of a sudden one of the most fascinating teams in the country for me to watch this year because of what happened to them. Additionally, too, can't forget Colorado. Now I don't think Colorado's going to be remotely competitive, but they're just going to be interesting to watch because of Deion Sanders and see how he handles being a P5 coach and see how he
they're going to do a
handles.
lot of losing.
Yeah, I agree. I think they win like 3-4 games max, but it's still going to be fascinating to watch prime time. They're coaching P5.
Oh yeah, I think he's gonna try to put out a show in the media sense of things. He's gonna try to get a lot of attention because he's thinking long term. He knows he's not gonna be able to win a lot of games this year, but he's looking in the long run, especially now he's gonna go to the Big 12.
Absolutely. So that's just one thing that I wanted to. But we'll save AFC West for next week.
Yeah. And I wanna thank Aaron and Jason joining in. It was really awesome, you guys.
Absolutely. Jason, the floor is yours. You have one last statement you want to make.
Amy Adams, give the Houston Oilers back to Houston. That is all. Thank you for having me.
You know what? I agree. We should either use those colors because those colors are too good not to be used, or let Houston have them. Like if Charlotte, the New Orleans Hornets could give back the Hornets to Charlotte, we can give back the Oilers to Houston. So
that is all. Thank you guys for having me as always. I appreciate the invite. It was fun. Always is.
Absolutely.
And Aaron, you're welcome anytime on our podcast.
I appreciate it. If we'll have to talk soccer on Saturdays.
Absolutely. And notice that we spent 0 time on the NFL preseason because who cares? And also, if you bet on the NFL preseason, you have issues.
Call the gambling help hotline.
Yeah. Also take Titans money line Sunday night. Saturday. Just kidding. All right, but for Aaron Young, Jason Warwick, and Gustavo Tomazeli, I'm Nicholas Hill, and you have been listening and watching Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, episode 89. Y'all have a great night.